listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by.
On the morning shift.
Anything
could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. I'm AJ Walsh. I'm glad to be here with you, and I'm glad that you're here with us. It is Wednesday, December the 13th, 2023. We got a great show planned for you this morning. It's a jumping off point from the last two shows that we had discussing the state of our media. It's interesting I use those two words in the same sentence, state media, I guess. And that's the what we're talking about, the media in general. I'm not talking going to the show or movies or things, but that's true as well. How much of it is there to inform us, and how much of it is there to I don't know if the word manipulate or persuade, things like this, right? So what is it there to do? Is it there to inform or persuade, right? Persuade us to one point or another of thought. So we will be talking about that today, and we have some more video from the National Citizens Inquiry with a reporter who worked with the CBC, I believe Global, CTV, all of them, and basically found some interesting things out with our media in Canada, and specifically the CBC, which is our state media, sponsored media from your tax dollars. And so you would hope that they would be, honest in their reporting and unbiased. But unfortunately, it looks like things indicate that that's not the case. And so, we will do a deep dive into that and our medical system. And are the two kind of joined together, right? Are they, working hand in hand with the last 4 years or so? Could you see some collaboration, if you will, with some possible big corporate entities to develop a story or develop a narrative that made the companies rich, the government's more powerful, and the media kind of bearing down to just basically telling one side of a story, or a side of a story, if you will, and not really covering the full gamut to inform us of the whole story, if you will. And so if that was the case, who, if anybody, would be held accountable for that? Will anybody ever be held accountable if that was the case? So that's our deep dive for today. It'll come in after local weather, local headlines. And so we'll get to that and much, much more. Your comments right after the weather. Let's dive right in, because I ended up running out of time yesterday because I went off on a big tangent at the beginning of the show, and I don't want to do that again today. So I welcome all of you that are coming on this morning. We'll have some good morning shout outs, news headlines, and our deep dive today right after the weather. So stick with us. Okay, and today's weather is brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. So for all things Sudbury weather, visit sudburyweather.ca as I get this up on the screen and full screened and all that stuff. So here you go. Currently it's minus 8 degrees, but it feels like minus 15. Very cool out there. Cold, if you will. Today, a few flurries ending this morning, then a mix of sun and cloud. 30% chance of flurries again during the day. Winds will be gusting up to 40 kilometers. High of -5, wind chill -15 this morning and -9 this afternoon. Tonight, clear, becoming partly cloudy near midnight, and the low will be -11, wind chill near -16, so similar to what we're feeling right now. Thursday, mix of sun and cloud, clearing early in the afternoon, and the high will be +2. Wind chill will feel like -14 in the morning, and not sure what the wind chill will affect the rest of the day, but the high will be +2 and a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. And then Friday, sunny with a high of 5. And Saturday, chance of flurries, 30%, high of -1. And then Sunday, high of +1, 30% chance of flurries, -3 and -2 on Monday and Tuesday, both a mix of sun and cloud. A look at your satellite here. And from Environment Canada, lots of clouds. This was taken at 1 a.m. This morning. And again, a lot of clouds there. And that was your weather, brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. We'll be back with news headlines, your comments, and much, much more. Thanks for being with us, and make sure to stick around. It's going to be a great show today. I promise. Okay, we're back, and there's a lot of people on this morning, more than usual, right at the beginning of the show. So thanks for being here. Quite a few people chiming in as well. Marianne, good morning from Barrie. Liked and shared as usual, which we appreciate for sure. Judy, good morning. Thanks for being with us. Denise as well. Good morning, everyone. As well as Monique with a snow emoji. Not my favorite emoji, but, it is that time of year. But much appreciated. Thanks, Monique. And Jerome, good morning, all. Belinda says, good morning. Never stop believing in the beautiful possibility that is you and your impact. Live in purpose. On purpose, you are valued. I like that. Live in purpose and on purpose. So live your life with meaning. And know that your influence counts for sure. Thank you so much for your positive comments each and every day, Belinda. They are so much appreciated. Maurice, good morning with a smiley emoji. I can't tell if it's a sun emoji, which it does look like, but it's nonetheless, it's smiling, and we appreciate it. Belinda says, where was the majority of the medical profession on behalf of the people that didn't want to take the experimental vaccine? People were denied treatments and life-saving surgeries, which we talked about. A gentleman from Sudbury, unfortunately, Garnet, who was one of those. I look at the medical profession now with a new pair of eyes. Something that could have happened, right? During the last 4 years, we kind of saw things that we might not have seen before because of what we're going through. And good morning, Liette from Collingwood. Good morning, all. Jerome says, I wonder if Marcus Schwabe could come on the show and defend CBC and all the lies are perpetuated, or he perpetuated. Well, again, right, our morning guy, which I listen to on a regular basis. And I think he's a great guy. I like listening to him. I think he's got a great radio presence. But yes, unfortunately, the news that's put before him to read on the screen, how much accountability would people take for that, correct? But I'm sure he's not going to come on the show. I could reach out. I often think about that. It would be great to have a candid conversation, but I don't know how candid somebody who's paid by a corporation to deliver the news that they package for you could even give their own opinion. If they were to give their own opinion, it would be a great show. It'd be entertaining. I just don't think that would happen. I'm sure he enjoys being a member of this community for sure. I would love, again, like, to have people like that on. Chris, good morning. Much appreciated for you being here. Denise as well. Blessings this morning from Espanola. Thanks, guys, for being on, and thanks for being with us, all y'all. We got a great bunch of people on this morning, so it's going to be a great show. A few local headlines, and then we're going to have to head right into, what we've been talking about with the CBC. It's going to be cutting like 600, 700 jobs. They get $1.5 billion of our money and to operate, but apparently they're not able to keep things going. They're going to have to cut jobs, but a lot of the upper echelon of CBC getting bonuses at the same time, which is interesting. And I think it's just a show of how mismanaged governments are run, because it's basically a government appendage, the CBC. It's a media arm of the government, which has a very strong liberal leaning, if not laying down in the liberal mire, totally that side. I thought it'd be really interesting to do an experiment and just find a conservative that works at the CBC, like one. See it, like, just go on a quest. It's like the Holy Grail, and try and find one conservative that works at the CBC. It would be interesting. If they were able to even admit it. They might lose their job if they did, right? Which is really telling of the country we live in and the state-run media that we have that are paid. In part, there's a lot of conservatives in the country that pay taxes. I'm sure most of them do. And they're paying for that media to then speak back to them in a way that doesn't really go with their point of view at all. Doesn't even give that side. Doesn't even have anyone from that side to speak and give their side when they're doing their stories. It's just one-sided, right? So anyways, a couple local headlines here, because I will digress if I don't watch myself. On Sudbury.news, where it's a news aggregator for all Sudbury news, and you have local, provincial, and federal news on the right column there as you scroll down. So that's right out of the government's newsrooms, right? So keeps everything current. So if you want to be current on what the government is sending out in terms of their press, it'll always keep you current. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It doesn't mean it is what it is. It's what they are putting out there, right? So if you want to keep your finger on the pulse and stay current to what they are doing and talking about, there it is right there for you. And then to the left of that in the main feed are all of the news organizations from Sudbury, Sudbury.com, CTV Northern Ontario, CBC Sudbury, and Sudbury Star comes in the feed here. So this is from CBC. Retired judge calls for unified family court to be established in Sudbury. A retired judge is advocating for the establishment of more effective family court to help families in crisis in Sudbury. So you can read more about that there. Just click on it. It goes to their website. I know today at 12, they're having a job fair at the Tom Davies Square for looking for workers to in the vulnerable sector industry. So working with very marginalized people, mainly homeless people. So that would be homeless people and possibly people also who struggle with addictions. So these agencies who deal in this arena, in this area, are looking for employees. So if you are the kind of person that can or has the schooling, the education, the experience, and the constitutional makeup to work in this industry with marginalized people, then this would be for you. And I see Roger on here. So if there was no experimental vaccine, how many deaths would there have been? We don't know that answer, right? That's an answer we don't know, but it's a good question. And how much longer would it have a crisis? Just wondering, for sure. We don't know, right? The dust is just settling now with how many people did it help and how many people did it hinder. So did it help people? We don't know. If they would have just left things be as they were, how would it have gone? And then as we look back, we can now look at those that chose not to take it, right, and follow their health. That's a real easy experiment, right? So those who chose not to see how much they were affected and died because of the pandemic, and how many survived and are thriving. And then we can look at the ones who took it and how many of those had an adverse reaction, how many of those died from the experimental vaccine. Because I do know, even in my own circle, of about 15 people in my circle who had severe adverse reactions and even some death due to that. Like I remember a relative, in-law relative, that posted on their Facebook saying, "Yeah, just got my second booster or whatever, and I'm starting to feel a little whatever, and I'm thinking, I know I wasn't feeling like this just before it, and I'm feeling like I have, there's something wrong, and I'm thinking it's because of what I just did." And then he passed away, right? So are we looking at people like that? And I know it's a sensitive subject for sure. Like, this is not something that is an easy conversation for anybody at all, anywhere, because what just happened to us has been very traumatic. It basically is the same as Stockholm syndrome. If you look up Stockholm syndrome, that's what we just went through as a society. And the steps of Stockholm syndrome, right? So anyways, I'll save that for another show because I just came across it last night and I thought that would be really good to look at the steps of Stockholm syndrome and compare it to what we just went through with the pandemic on a mass scale. David, good morning. He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker. You're making me speak Shakespearean this morning, and I'm not good with my eths in the morning. Okay, he that oppresses the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that honoreth him hath mercy on the poor. So basically, be good to the poor. I think we can sum that one right up. And don't oppress people. And Monique, good rising. Thanks for being with us, Monique. Much appreciated. So anyways, there's the job fair happening today. And we'll talk more about the medical system. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So if that's something that interests you, what we're just talking about just now from Roger's comment, which we really appreciate that, Roger, thank you so much. We don't know the answers to this, and that's what we're looking to get right now. We want to get the answers to what's going on. We don't want to bury our head in the sand. The National Citizens Inquiry actually went out to try to look at how we managed everything over the last 4 years, and get reputable people to organize it, run it, and get testimony from people. And I think those testimonies in their testimonies talked a lot about what I just mentioned, that I know, quite a few people that had adverse reactions, which isn't talked about in our media. It's really not. Like, everything was safe and effective, and that's all you heard. And I remember a nurse. She was the first nurse in Arizona on national TV. And she got it, and everyone was trying to show how safe and effective it was. And she got it right on live TV, and she started getting lightheaded, and she passed out. Later found out she died. And that was on national television. But no word in the mainstream media about what just happened. And okay, so let's say it helped 75% of the people, and all in all, it was a good thing. We really don't know because it was an experiment. But we need to look at it. We need to at least admit, maybe if there was 25% of the people that it affected adversely, why not at least just admit it because there are known cases, very known cases of people having adverse reactions. If in my own circle there's 15 of them, and I don't even try to go out and find them, I can just imagine in the world how many there are. Right? So why aren't we talking about it? Why can't it be just like when you see those pharmaceutical commercials on television, where at the end it says may cause, and then the list goes on: bloody nose, diarrhea, vomiting. It may cause this, and if it does, consult your doctor. Like, why didn't we get any of that with the experimental solutions that we had? Right? Why didn't we get any warnings that it could cause this? Well, you know why we couldn't? Because it wasn't tested. They didn't have any trials. You were the trial. We were the trial. Right? We were the trial. We are the experiment. Like it or not, it's the truth. Like, I don't care what anyone says, that they didn't go through the proper testing like every other vaccine does or any other drug does. It takes years and years and years and years, right, to develop these drugs. So, like it or not, good or bad, right? Not saying one or the other right now. It was an experiment. You are the guinea pig. It just is what it is. You are the test, because they didn't go through the trials like they did, because it was needed. It was Operation Warp Speed. Remember from our friend Donald Trump in the United States, Operation Warp Speed. He removed all the barriers for the drug companies to get the vaccine to market. And that basically wiped out all the trials and all the safeguards that were put in place previously to make sure that drugs were indeed safe and effective. And this particular thing didn't go through that, right? It just didn't. So, okay, what side you're on, it makes people's blood boil when we have conversations like this. You have to admit, though, that's what happened. So regardless, and we're now looking at the effects of that. Now, one industry just wants to keep going as if there's nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Just keep going, keep getting them, keep doing it. It's for your own good. Let's just do it. Line up, get them. They're free. You're paying for them for your tax dollars, right? So there's that. And then there's some people going, okay, well, maybe we could take a little bit of a step back here and let's look at things. Let's really look at what just happened. What did we take? How is it affecting people? Was it good? Is it not? Just like you were saying in your question. How many people? We don't know that. That's what we're here to understand right now. So we're all in the same boat with that. So anyways, why don't we just dive right in then today? We're going to look at the CBC's coverage of this particular, the last, 5 years or so, 4 years. And we talked about, they were flagged and people were not listening to them or not trusting them. The majority of Canadians did not trust the news they were getting from CBC. So they said, okay, we're going to join these organizations, because this particular gentleman, journalist, who was testifying at the National Citizens Inquiry, who worked for the CBC Global News, all of them in Canada, basically gave the definition of news gathering, of what news is, what it's supposed to be, and propaganda. So he found that different news organizations covering where this virus even originally initiated from was covered by certain outlets, and it was known to be where it came from, right? A lab in a town in a country. And that is what it is. And the lab was called the name of the virus. It's pretty simple. They were doing experimental gain of function research. And there you have it. And it leaked. So that was the story. And many news outlets covered it like that. But our CBC said that's a conspiracy theory. And you shouldn't trust anyone who says that without reporting. So they weren't news gathering. They weren't showing facts. They were just saying, if your dad was to come to you and say, hey, I heard this story from the Washington Post that said it came from a lab in a city in a country far, far away, don't listen to them. So they're basically saying don't listen to other credible news sources either, and saying this is what you tell your dad. You don't get into arguments with them. You just say, okay, agree with them and whatever, and don't make a big deal about it. But slowly have them come around to knowing that this is a conspiracy theory or whatever. So it's like after that, people are like, what are you guys talking about? So CBC came out and said, we're going to join these organizations that it'll show that we're news, we're actually news and you can trust us, right? Because these organizations are trustworthy. So this particular gentleman goes through these these associations, if you will, that the CBC belongs to kind of show you, hey, we're real news, but is it really? So he's already into a couple of them here. We'll just begin where we left off yesterday.
To help establish a foundation of trust, not truth, trust is what they're looking for. One of their tools is called the power of the machine, harnessing AI to fight disinformation. So I can only surmise from this that Microsoft is using AI to identify anybody speaking words that they want to identify as to be censored or call misinformation, label misinformation so you will agree with their censorship. The next one is called the Trust Project. Now this one is largely tech. Craigslist, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft are involved. Again, helping tech support trustworthy news. Helping tech. What do we care about tech and truth and news? How are they together all of a sudden? We stand for integrity. They say, look for our 8 trust indicators. We built the trust indicators. So they have listed, all they have to do is tell the truth. They don't need no 8 trust indicators. And interestingly, Google, Facebook, and Bing all use the trust indicators in display and behind the scenes. So somehow they are censoring it before it gets to you. I'm going the wrong way. These are the members of the Trust Project. Now, this goes way beyond the CBC. Globe and Mail is also in there. CTV is a member. The Walrus magazine in Canada is supposed to be an independent thought magazine. They're part of this project. The Canadian Press. So I put this up there to let you know that it is not just the CBC. The reason they all sound the same is because they're all part of this trust campaign. But the CBC is also part of something else. It's something with just public broadcasters. It's called the Global Task Force for Public Media. Global Task Force exists to defend the values and interests of public media. Excellent. But it was formed to develop a consensus and a single strong voice among them. And that's the CBC, BBC News, ABC Australia, Korean Broadcasting, they joined recently, France Television, Radio New Zealand, ZDF from Germany, and SVT from Sweden. Now, I can't imagine, having worked at the CBC for almost a decade and being told every day our job is to elevate the voices of Canadians on Canadian stories, to unite our vast country and make us all feel as one. What single issue do we have with Korean broadcasting when that is our mandate? What issue does Radio New Zealand have with Swedish television when their mandate is the same, to elevate their own people? This is a bizarre conglomerate of public broadcasters, and I would put forth to the panel that the public broadcasters are the ones that are not easily bought because the advertisers don't exist and therefore they have no influence. So something else was done here. Now, the Public Task Force is headed by our CBC president, Catherine Tate. She is the current president. 3 months ago, she gave a speech at Simon Fraser University. The first word out of her mouth was trust. Trust seems to be in short supply. The next phrase is disinformation, conspiracy theories, U2 rabbit hole. This is the Trusted News Initiative mantra. This is what she was talking about at Simon Fraser University. She goes around, makes speeches, and says, please trust us. So let's get to what they do. In addition to the first piece that I saw in the National that rubbed me the wrong way, I listened to a piece one day in my car by Matt Galloway. Again, a national treasure. I love this guy. When I first heard him on CBC Toronto, I thought, oh my God, there's a future. He might be the next Zosky. And then he turned on us. He did a story on March 29th, 2021, where he interviewed a guy from something called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And I thought this was going to be about anti-Semitism or something, digital hate. Instead, the guy said people who are recommending vitamin C intravenous and hydrogen peroxide nebulization are hate. And I thought, well, how is recommending health treatments? I mean, vitamin C intravenous has been going on for 50 years. It's used in cancer treatment. It's used in all kinds of treatment. Hydrogen peroxide nebulization is a simple drugstore hydrogen peroxide 3% mixed with water and vaporized into a mask so you clean out your nasal passage and stop viral replication, and it's common. You can buy them. So how are these things dangerous? How are they hateful? It was particularly interesting to me. But the expert guest went on to say that these people will kill. And he said that the hydrogen peroxide nebulizers, which are benign, are literally inhaling bleach. This is his words, literally inhaling bleach. It's actually not. It's actually literally a hydrogen peroxide nebulizer. It's literally nebulizing hydrogen peroxide. It's not literally inhaling bleach. Inhaling bleach is literally inhaling bleach. He lied. So why is he lying to Matt Galloway? Why is Matt Galloway letting him lie to me on the radio? And I know it's a lie for a fact. The same guy from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, who also went on to say anti-vaccine misinformation is hate, which I believe diminishes the power of that word for all those who have experienced it. He went on Marketplace to say this, but then Marketplace took it to the next level. They became a censor. Marketplace reported 800 pieces of information to social media giants, attempting to have them censored, claiming they were misinformation. And then they complained that the media giants only took down 12% of what CBC said was wrong on the internet. So my questions are, since when is the CBC deciding what misinformation on other media platforms is? What is it their business? They're the CBC. Do your job. Pay attention to yourself. Why are you going out correcting, in your view, what's wrong with other media? How is the CBC or Marketplace or this reporter qualified to comb the internet for 800 posts and declare them to be false? We never found out in the piece. And who at the CBC is the arbiter of truth and misinformation on the behalf of us Canadians who like to decide for ourselves? So I wrote a letter to the head of journalistic standards at CBC, Paul Hambleton, who has since left the position. I asked him to do three things for me, please. I told him who I was and that I'd worked there, and I named some people that we would know in common. And I said, please supply me with the policy at the CBC that describes the mandate to correct what you deem to be misinformation by other organizations. Please include the process by which information is deemed to be incorrect and therefore requires correction or censorship by the CBC. And I asked to please supply me with any other example outside of the COVID-19 story where CBC corrects what it deems to be misinformation on social media. Now, he did reply to me, but he didn't answer any of those questions. Another thing that the CBC has done very successfully is it's promoted a new identifiable group of Canadians and fomented hate against them, the anti-vaxxer. What is an anti-vaxxer? Who is an anti-vaxxer? Does someone whose partner had a severe reaction to the vaccine and was told they must get a second one if they want to keep their job, and then they had a worse reaction, and this happened, and I've talked to people, I know it exists. And then maybe they don't want their kid to get it. Are they an anti-vaxxer? Do they need to have mental correction, psychological retraining? What does an anti-vaxxer believe? We don't really know, other than it's bad and you should fear them, according to the CBC. There was an interview with a Conservative member of Parliament named Marilyn Gladu from Sarnia, Ontario, at a time when the House of Commons was about to reopen to parliamentarians. And a number of the Conservative MPs had a very serious concern about the mandate against them. There was anywhere between 15 and 30 of them. They were starting a mini caucus of, I suppose, the unvaccinated. Now, Marilyn Gladu bravely took the interview with CBC about this because it was only going to go one way. And Katie Simpson, who, again, an amazing journalist, I think Katie's fantastic at what she does, pardon my language, but she beat the hell out of this woman on the air. Everything that Marilyn Gladu said, which was reasonable and thoughtful, Katie responded, aren't you just giving air to the anti-vaxxers? Isn't this giving support to the anti-vaxxers? The anti-vaxxer became the boogeyman in this story, and Marilyn Gladu held herself extremely well. And at one point, Katie said, are any of your unvaccinated colleagues going to try to get into the House of Commons? So I thought, wow, you've just framed them as like break-in artists or petty criminals here. And Marilyn Gladu answered, probably not. They need a passport to get in and they'll never get past the guard. And then she said, will you go to the Parliament? And Marilyn Gladu very coyly said, well, show up on the day and see if I come. And she stopped the interview and repeated the question and said, this is a matter of public safety. Are you going to come? So in that moment, she framed every unvaccinated person, including her guest on the show, as a danger to public safety. Katie Simpson had no evidence, and still has no evidence, that an unvaccinated person is any more likely to transmit COVID than a vaccinated person. And we now know that there's really no difference. And if anything, if you have natural immunity, you're less likely to get it or spread it. She had no scientific evidence. She had no basis of it. That's because this was not news gathering. She was practicing propaganda. An excellent example of CBC propaganda was a piece they had, Meet the Unvaccinated. Those people who are these strange people? Why some Canadians still haven't had the shot? The sub-headline was, some suspect the science, some don't think they're vulnerable, and some just don't trust the government. There was no mention that the vaccines were not fully tested by the standards that vaccines have always been tested in Canada. No mention of that. People knew that, but there was no mention that that's maybe why they didn't want to do it. There was no mention of the adverse reactions that were already at this point being reported on government websites, including deaths from the COVID-19 vaccines. They eliminated that side of the story. They suppressed one side because it wasn't news gathering, it was propaganda. On January 15th, 2021, the CBC published a story where they talked about a scientific paper that was written by a number of esteemed Canadian scientists and academics that the COVID-19 booster shots didn't work. They were only 37% effective against Omicron. So the story was then updated. Somehow they shifted the data and it was a slight difference. So the CBC story was, the original study was seized on by anti-vaxxers, highlighting the dangers of early research in pandemics. In other words, don't trust the scientists. The anti-vaxxers will put their message out. So this study found that the boosters only worked 30%, they were only 37% effective. So the story goes on to say that the study was revised, but not before being spread widely on social media by anti-vaxxers, academics, and the Russians. So we got some boogeyman in there, the Russians, but they're saying anti-vaxxers, this group they're fomenting hate against, is equated with academics now. Now they're belittling the academics because they don't like what they're saying. Not because what the academics are saying isn't true, but the CBC has a different message for us. So this is the most mind-blowing part of this particular story. Just bear with me here for a minute. When the findings were updated with additional data, they showed very different results, say the CBC. The researchers found that vaccine effectiveness was 36%, even less, against symptomatic Omicron, 7 to 59 days after 2 doses. So after your second dose, you got about a month, and then it's only 36% effective, with no protection after 6 months. So they were no good 6 months later. So by any measure of vaccine, they don't work, or our expectations of a vaccine, they don't work. But after 6 months, or after the booster, it was 61% effective 1 week after the booster. Now notice, so that's the correction. Instead of 1 week after the booster being 37% effective, it was 61% effective. This is a marginal difference. This is not a dramatic difference. It's particularly because there's a qualifying language, and I'm trained to recognize qualifying language because it's redundant and it should always be removed before broadcast. So it used to be called not ready for air, but now it's broadcast regularly. So 61% effective 1 week after the booster. What about 2 weeks after the booster? They're not telling us. Maybe it went down to this 37. We don't know, because they are selectively telling. This is, and the definition of propaganda, this is a half-truth. It's not the whole truth. This is a collection of headlines that were between May 2021 and September 2021. And I'll take you back to, this is the big push for vaccine mandates. The university kids all had to get vaccinated if they wanted to go to school. Government workers had to get vaccinated by around mid-September. I'll just read them quickly. A psychologist explains vaccine hesitancy. Experts weigh in on the possible factors behind hesitancy. Black Canadians are more hesitant about COVID-19, survey says. Vaccine hesitancy can make for awkward talks, like if you don't believe your father. Mediator says, these people were vaccine hesitant. Here's why they changed their mind, May 12th, 2021. CBC poll. Results give us an idea of who the vaccine hesitant in Alberta really are. Who are these strange people? University of Calgary Vaccine Hesitancy Guide gives doctors facts for struggling patients who are struggling with whether to take the vaccine. Now, none of these offer a second perspective about why people might be vaccine hesitant. They strongly favor one particular interest, and that is defined as propaganda, not news gathering. The next thing that the CBC did, or in conjunction, was the suppression of medicine. Ivermectin was shown worldwide to be effective, particularly in developing countries where they have it available because ivermectin is used there regularly. Now, on September 2nd, 2021, again, right around the time when we needed to have no medicine because they wanted to force the mandate, Health Canada is warning, this is from CBC Broadcast, Health Canada is warning people not to take a drug meant for horses and cows to combat COVID-19. Ivermectin is a dewormer in animals and, quote, can cause serious illness, even death in humans. This is a lie that was told to Canada by the CBC on behalf of Health Canada. The fact is that ivermectin is human medicine. It's a miracle medicine, and its inventor was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2015. It says, and this is from the Nobel Prize website, he cultured a bacteria which produce substances that inhibit the growth of other microorganisms. Maybe that's how it works. In 1978, he succeeded in culturing a strain called avermectin, which in a chemically modified form, ivermectin, proved effective against river blindness and elephantiasis. In fact, it eliminated river blindness virtually in South America through millions and millions of doses and nobody dying from it, like the CBC says you might. And this wasn't just the CBC. This was a global push to suppress ivermectin. An attorney general in the state of Nebraska decided to do a legal opinion and sign his name to it, in which he said, in the decade leading up to COVID-19 pandemic, studies began to show ivermectin's surprising versatility, which is why it's used for things other than river blindness. By 2017, ivermectin had demonstrated antiviral activity against several RNA viruses, including influenza, Zika, HIV, and dengue. I covered a dengue epidemic in India in 1998, at which time the doctors told me the trouble with dengue versus malaria, where the symptoms are very similar, is there's treatment for malaria, there's none for dengue, and that was 1998. So by 2017, they were realizing ivermectin was the miracle cure for dengue, or at least had been shown to have some positive results. Another review, says this state attorney general in Nebraska, summarized, and a review, of course, is a look at multiple studies. They review multiple studies and they come up with a final conclusion. It summarized the antiviral effects of ivermectin demonstrated through studies over the past 50 years. It wasn't new and it wasn't deadly.
Mr. Palmer, I'll
Yes.
just let you know we're about 10 minutes, just to help time yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the Alberta Health Services on October 5th had published on their website that it is, ivermectin is FDA and Health Canada approved for people, not just cows and horses. It is used to treat parasitic infections, intestinal infections, and now even rosacea. The Indian Express wrote that the state of Uttar Pradesh, which has a population of about 250 million people, had dramatically reduced the COVID positivity rate, and eventually, 3 months after this published article, reduced the COVID death rate to 0 in Uttar Pradesh. So when a doctor named Daniel Nagase walked into an emergency room in Alberta and found 3 people dying of COVID. Their charts showed that they were getting worse every day. He decided, based on the Alberta Health Services, based on these stories out of Uttar Pradesh, to ask them if they wanted to try ivermectin. It was their choice. They all said yes, and they all got better. Then he was fired for doing that. He spoke out about that, and somebody recorded it and put it on a social media, and the CBC did this story. Doctor who says he gave ivermectin to rural Alberta COVID-19 patients prompts a warning from the health authority for spreading misinformation. In the same story, he says the drug worked quickly, allowing all 3 to leave the hospital. And I called Daniel Nagase, Dr. Nagase, I interviewed him, and he said one of them was 90. And he went back to his nursing home. They almost got completely better within 18 hours, but another Alberta Health Services medical director barred the patients from getting any more of the drug. Can you imagine if you can't breathe and somebody gives you a pill and you can breathe and another doctor comes in and says you're not getting any more? That happened. It's in this CBC News story. And they went after the guy who cured them. Dr. Nagase was removed from the hospital and relieved of his medical duties the following day. The story here is that a doctor cured COVID with a pill that cost a nickel that's already been working all around the world. We can all go back to our hockey rinks. We can all go back to our jobs. We don't need the experimental vaccine. There's a pill. All we have to do is put a good supply in every hospital in Canada, and if anybody gets sick enough that they can't breathe, they go into the hospital, they're administered ivermectin, and 18 to 36 hours later, they're breathing and they go home. End of pandemic. Dr. Nagase should be on a stamp. 20 years from now, there should be a little vignette about that moment when he decided, I'm going to try this drug and end COVID-19 in Canada. Instead, the CBC went after his throat because it's propaganda. It's not news gathering. This is the photograph on the slide here of the ivermectin from the CBC website, under which the cut line says ivermectin is used primarily to rid livestock of patients. I'll draw your attention to the box in the photograph's hands and the yellow on the right-hand corner where there is a picture of 3 human beings. So this is international and multilingual. There's an adult and an adolescent and a baby. And the baby has an X through it because you give babies ivermectin in a liquid suspension so they don't choke on the pill. This is human ivermectin, photograph on the CBC website, and they're saying it's for livestock. This is a lie, a half-truth, disinformation, propaganda brought to you by the CBC. What the Indian Express did by telling what the Chief Minister said about ivermectin's success was news gathering. What the CBC did, saying ivermectin is for horses and cows and can cause death, was a lie, and it was only propaganda. There's no other way to describe it. Quickly going, because I'm running out of time here, to the Freedom Convoy. I happened to be in Ottawa visiting friends. I had been doing some volunteer work with the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, which is an excellent group of scientists, and I encourage everyone to look at their website if they're looking for truth instead of trust. There's a photograph here of your witness standing in front of the Peace Tower in Ottawa, looking down on all the Canadian flags, the Quebec flags, the Freedom Convoy. These are the photographs I took. Families, somebody holding the Charter of Rights, freedom, lest we forget, from the vets, and God bless. This is what I saw. And the very first report on the CBC was by an excellent reporter named David Common, and he's walking, you can look this up, he's walking through the crowd and he's feeling that positive energy. And he can't even contain himself. He says it's a party. There's jubilance, thousands of Canadians protesting the mandates. That was day 1. On day 2, these pictures emerged. Nazi flag. Confederate flag. The Canadian Confederate flag is largely meaningless in Canada because it doesn't have any history in our country, but it is a symbol of hate, and it's used as a symbol of hate. So when these photographs emerged, our Prime Minister came out and condemned the hateful rhetoric. He said he will not meet people who promote hate. So that was it. If that's 100,000 Nazis out there, and I don't know where we were hiding them before this day, but we had 100,000 Nazis, according to the Prime Minister, who are promoting hate, end of story, no meeting, not going to discuss your issue. So I did what any journalist would do, and I looked for a reaction story. The Prime Minister says this about you. What's your reaction? I went up and I knocked on the very first truck that was very close to the CBC building, maybe about 200 meters from the CBC. I knocked on the very first truck and I interviewed the very first trucker.
What would you say to the politicians like Trudeau, Singh, the mayor of Ottawa, who say this is organized by the far-right extremists and the racists?
I'd say you're all lying. You know you're lying. Look at me. Look right around in Ottawa. We are from every nation, every country, every background, every color that you can possibly find, you can find in Ottawa in the last couple of days. You know you're lying, and that's false.
And like a good journalist, I went to the next truck. I didn't just take his word for it that he wasn't a white supremacist. I asked this man at the very next truck. Is a group of far-right extremist racists.
That's just garbage. That's hogwash, because there are people from all walks of life out here, right? I'm a man of color, right? And I have every few trucks you go down, there's someone of color here, right? There are people in the street that are colored. I'm not too sure where they're getting that from, or who they're looking at, or who they're talking to, because this is nothing like that, right? There might be a few folks here who want to spread different agenda and try to tarnish what we stand for, but that's them saying a far-right movement. That could not be far from the truth.
Why are you really here?
I'm here to stand up for fellow truckers and push back, because the government keep pushing us, and it's not democratic anymore. If the government will try to control the people and forcing you to do things against your will.
Why weren't these guys on the CBC? It's their job to go out and do a live. It's not even hard. They just had to walk. It was right outside their door. I went out and I found another guy. Look at this guy. Do I look like a white supremacist to you? Says this man of color. He is a very interesting guy. When he heard about the trucker convoy, he was living in Calgary. He got in the car with his wife and his very young child. I think his son was about 4, and they drove all the way to Ottawa to support. But these 3 pictures were defining that movement. The Nazi flags and the Confederate flags. And I thought, I didn't see them. I was there those first 5 days. I didn't see any of these flags. Rebel News, which is an alternative news, which was marginal because it's largely a conservative mouthpiece, I guess you would call it, trying to get rid of Trudeau and put a conservative government in. That's kind of their position. But during the last 3 years, there's been more truth on Rebel News than I've seen on any other media in all of Canada, and I say that as an experienced journalist. Their intrepid reporter, Alexa Lavoie, who I think is one of the greatest investigative reporters in Canada today, noticed that these 3 pictures were taken by 3 different people. One of them by David Chan, a longtime Liberal photographer. One of them by Andrew Mead, a known Trudeau photographer. And another by Randy Boswell, who's a reporter, a writer, I guess. But he writes a lot using about misinformation, anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists. This is his. So how did they all get in the exact same place? She noticed that the Peace Tower is in the same aspect ratio, the same distance, depth as in all of the 3 pictures. All of 3 of these people were in the exact same spot when that guy unfurled that flag. She was curious about that. These 2 pictures were the only ones seen of the Nazi flag, and the reason they're still pictures is because it wasn't unfurled long enough for any of the 10,000 cameras in the place to see it and film it. She went to the first one on the left, and she found that it's a little parquet setting. She found the setting, and she noticed that it was nowhere near the protest. It was down on a little walkway. So this entire thing with all these flags was staged, according to the report. The second one on the right is very interesting because the camera angle is from down below. And she tried to reproduce that camera angle, but she had to go down to the Rideau Canal, which was locked and closed because they do that every winter because of the snow. And it's.
So I think this particular reporter makes a case, shows facts, really, the difference between news gathering and propaganda, it is a thing. News gathering's a thing, right? Propaganda's a thing, right? But we believe propaganda is only found in countries like Russia or China, other totalitarian communist countries, not in Canada. But this reporter points out very well very articulately and shows the facts. And there are still people who will say, and just put their hands to their ears and say, oh, well, but those people are the ones that, again, right, you're malleable. You're the ones that the governments believe that you're easy to control. You're easy to get into your mind and just propagandize you, brainwash you, right? So you're seeing how these are on purpose, tactics by our state-run media to misinform us while we're paying their salaries, right? So we're not paying them to misinform us. If we were, like, let's say you were asked, hey, do you want to pay people to misinform you? You said, yeah, I love being misinformed. Here's my money. Then that's good. Like, why don't we just have that on your tax forms? Do you like being misinformed and do you like propaganda? Check here and your taxes will go towards that. Do you like actually people doing news gathering and informing you of facts? Then check this. And then your money goes to that. Why don't we have something like that, right? If you want to have propaganda, that's what you're doing. Just make it transparent. Some people love it. Obviously, we have people even on the show here who love propaganda. They love it. And so they'll check it off on their taxes. So you'll still get maybe not 1.5 billion, maybe you'll get 100 million. You'll just downsize a bit like everyone else has to do and actually do news gathering. Or no, you can still do propaganda because the people who are paying you love propaganda. And so you can continue to do that. It's transparent. And that's fine, right? Let's call a spade a spade. Let's live in a world of transparency. Why not? What kind of world do you want to live in? Untransparent? I don't know. Maybe you do. That's fine. Like I said, check that box for the propaganda media outlet and away you go. Bob's your uncle. So thanks for listening today, watching. We appreciate you. We'll be back, God willing, same time, same place tomorrow. And I do have that piece on the medical industry and by a bona fide, renowned doctor going to be giving us the lay of the land. But I thought we could at least get most of the way through this particular presentation today. And then we'll look at maybe the health system itself has been infiltrated and isn't exactly what we're thinking that it is, and we'll look into that. So anyways, we'll be back same time, same place tomorrow, hopefully. And have a great Wednesday, everyone. Hump day. See you tomorrow. Ciao. Stay tuned now for Your Shot Daily on CKLU 96.7 FM.
Safety reasons. So she wondered, how did someone get down to that spot in a locked and closed area at the moment that
This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.